Good morning, and welcome to New Food Who Dis, where we get reacquainted with food that's antiquated. And today, we're not cooking a GD thing, except for some knowledge! Alrighty then, so today I'm going to be talking about this cookbook. And since we don't actually need the kitchen, I'm going to go somewhere else so that my girlfriend can make her smoothie. Okay, much better. We're in a more comfortable room. I have my usual 9 a.m. corn whiskey, and let's dive in. The point of this channel is to resurrect old, unfamiliar recipes, and in doing so, honor the predecessors of the rich global food culture that we find ourselves in today. But to do that, I need some source material, and lo and behold, I have it right here. This is the Book of Tried Recipes. This fucking garbage truck outside. In mint condition, this book has 64 pages, but my copy has seen some shit and only has 60. It also needs some chapstick. So this book was written by a quote-unquote experienced domestic science teacher and housekeeper, especially for the Ingman Matthews Range Company, and was included with the purchase of the company's flagship wood cook stove, poetically named the Range Eternal. Sadly, the company itself was not eternal, and it didn't make it past the 1920s. But based on their expiration date, it would seem that this book is probably at least 100 years old, maybe 120. Now, the stove itself is awesome and really deserves its own episode, but I'm not even gonna touch that. Because you may not be aware of this, but out there is a very intense community of enthusiasts who would love nothing more than for me to slip up, kidnap me, and test if their antique stove gets hot enough to incinerate bone. In the meantime, you might want to check out some of the videos that I've linked, and despite this book's compact size, it covers a wide range of recipes. Basic techniques like how to extract onion juice, beverages like boiled coffee, which we made in episode 1, fish, poultry, and meats like jellied veal and beef casserole, vegetables like cold slaw, classic salads too like banana salad and jellied tomato salad, entrees like the delicious sounding mush souffle. So at first glance, this recipe book seems like any other recipe book. But once you get past the recipes, that's when shit gets weird. Here's what I mean, is scattered throughout the recipes, you've got these giant diatribes. It's like textbook language. It's full of pseudoscience and really kind of outdated chemistry. Here are some samples. Mineral salts exist in small quantities in all foods and are important for the clotting of the blood. Now you're making me hungry. On vegetables, with the exception of potatoes and the legumes, vegetables have little food value. On cooking in general, cooking of food is sometimes done merely to make it palatable, but attractive food has a marked effect on digestion. That's not true, because I've eaten some beautiful stuff before, and it was not good. Like, down there. The other weird thing about this is that there's absolutely no whimsy and no happiness in this recipe book, which is very different than what we're used to nowadays. Things like, oh, my grandmother made this for me when I was a kid. Okay, there's absolutely none of that. So we have this kind of weird academic tone. It's very cold, pragmatic. It makes it very clear why books like The Joy of Cooking were welcomed with open arms later on down the road. So it raises an important question. Why is it like this? Why is it so cold and robotic? Well, to answer that, let's hunker down for a little history lesson. Okay. Now that we are adequately hunkered, it's time for a recklessly skin-deep history lesson. Let's jump all the way back. 1800s. The Industrial Revolution is playing just the tip with the United States, but we all know how that goes. Eventually, the US starts full-on shifting from an agrarian economy to an industrial and service-based one. Men increasingly heed the siren's call of the factory whistle, leaving the household in the care of the women. 1861. The American Civil War begins, which, like most wars, kills off a large segment of the male population, thereby increasing the burden felt by women taking care of the home and family. 1862. the Morrill Act passes, establishing land-grant colleges that, among other things, began teaching the burgeoning field of domestic sciences to women. This rationalized approach to housework gave an air of profession to the average homemaker, in turn elevating her status, albeit only marginally, in the eyes of society and the manufacturers of household products. 1893. The Chicago World's Fair takes place and everybody's head explodes at all the awesome shit they never seen before. Society was essentially a mouth-breathing 9-year-old, and the World's Fair was like a giant Sharper image store. Many of the attendees were women, and many of the attractions were catered just to them, including wood-cooked stoves. Many of these women also stayed at the hotel owned by H.H. Holmes, and that guy was a real jerk. But despite that awkward setback, the point is that women were gradually becoming more visible outside the home, at important social events, in the way products were designed, and in the workforce. To put some numbers around that, in 1870, only about 1 in 10 women worked outside the home. By 1900, that number was 1 in 5. And by 1910, it was 1 in 4. So you see where I'm going with this. Slowly but surely, women were getting out there, hitting the factories, hitting the manufacturing lines, and slowly shedding the doldrums of being relegated to the household. But wait, if the women are leaving to work full-time jobs, who's taking care of the house? Who's doing the laundry? Who's cleaning up? Who's cooking the food? And who's watching the kids? A nanny? Some agency that people were just paying for? Bingo, it was still the women. Imagine you're one of those women. You're out there making that double income dream a reality, and you also pulling double duty at home. And you're doing all that, and all of a sudden you get this shit dropped on you.
Oh, darling.
Yes, dear?
Darling, I just wanted to tell you how grateful I am that you decided to take a job on the line at the plant.
Oh, Winston, I'm so happy to hear you say that.
I got you a gift.
Oh, you rascal, don't keep me waiting. What is it?
It's a 4,000-pound stove, darling. It will require us to put a hole in the ceiling, requires a nearly non-stop flow of chopped wood, and will make everything you own smell like a campfire. You're welcome, darling. Good night.
So to get back to our initial question as to why this cookbook was so blunt and cold and robotic and joyless in the way it conveyed its information, the answer is simple. It's because it was written for women who needed to get shit done, son! And having this cookbook, this cold, calculated, joyless cookbook, made using their newfangled stove easier. This cookbook not only gives you recipes, it gives you rules. Rules on how to buy ingredients, how to cook the ingredients, how to measure them, store them, preserve them, and serve them. Rules so that you could use this bastard appliance smartly without creating more work for yourself. And I think that understanding that is pretty badass. And as a reminder of how fortunate we are, we now have endless cookbooks and food blogs and TV shows and YouTube channels that help us cook because we want to, not because we have to. And these modern day resources that we have, they teach us to cook with warmth so that we can cook with warmth. And in turn, we can then use cooking as a way to say, I love you, instead of, I'm sorry dear, I cried in the meatloaf again. Hey all, hope you enjoyed. If you did, please remember to like my video, subscribe to my channel, cook lots of food, and eat it with friends. See you guys next time.